questions as you go along, do please pop them in the chat. Yeah, respond. Keep those reactions coming if you feel moved to do so, and please make sure your microphone is muted unless you are talking. So this is a panel discussion where we're looking at the highlights of Greener AHP Week, what we've learnt, and what next steps there are to move forwards. So on the panel we have Suzanne Rastrick, the Chief Allied Health Professions Officer, Derek Munn, who is Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, Rebecca Harrison, patient advocate at the British Medical Journal, who is also a retired diagnostic sonographer, and Manraj Phull, who is Senior Net Zero Delivery Manager at Greener NHS England, and a specialist urology registrar. So I am chairing this session. My name is Ben Whitaker. I am the Sustainable Healthcare Delivery Lead and Allied Health Professions Lead at the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. So my first question for Suzanne. So we've seen lots of great examples over the 30 events this week, and on social media, the projects AHPs have been sharing of the great work they're doing. So lots of great examples of Greener AHP during the week. Do you have any insights to support how people can scale up the good ideas?
Thanks very much, Ben, and colleagues, good afternoon. And again, if my other colleagues on the panel will also come in on each of the questions that Ben's going to be addressing to us, as it won't just be me, you'll be pleased to know. Equally, if there are questions that you've got for us, please do pop them in the chat, and Ben will be very happy to pose those to us. So please don't be shy on a Friday afternoon. If I could start, I guess, by some context from my point of view, and I'm really delighted to welcome colleagues from Wales too this afternoon, albeit that I am the Chief Officer for England. Clearly, and I was very clear on day one of this, that you know, the climate emergency is a health emergency, and we're evidentially very clear about that. And clearly, we all have a material duty, myself and everybody else, to lean into this agenda. It's something I'm very proud, as I said on Monday, that we've been on a journey with since 2019. And we did our first piece of material work around this in 2020, which led to the development of the Greener AHP Hub, which I know many of you will have been referring to. And when we came to develop our second strategy for England, which is obviously called AHPs Deliver, I was very keen in a visionary sense that we started with the people and communities that we serve, not we ourselves as registrants. And clearly what we heard back from people and communities was the issue around environmental sustainability was really important. And that came through the thematic reviews that were undertaken that then developed AHPs Deliver when it was published in June 2022. So to me, this narrative for us as allied health professionals has a really strong democratic provenance from the communities and people that we serve in health and care. But importantly, when we launched, we had a week-long, my conference is normally in June in England, and we only have one day ordinarily, but we had a 5-day sort of festival, if you will, to launch AHPs Deliver. And we had, at the time we were mentioning the sections on environmental sustainability, colleagues were saying in the sort of session we're in this afternoon, can you do something to help us with think about implementation? And the genesis of that was our first ever Greener AHP Week we had last year. So I think, Ben, it was really important just to give a bit of context into why we find ourselves here on a Friday afternoon talking about a week that we've just had in a multi-professional sense, which has been fabulous. But you asked about the sort of scaling up, and I think sometimes we can feel very much on our own with these issues. And there's a whole multitude of things, and I've been really, really proud as Chief about what I've seen this week. But there are, you know, the individual professional networks we have, and I know Derek will probably touch on that more later from the professional body perspective. But at local level, you've obviously got within your own services, whether that's in health service, whether that's in learning disabilities, mental health, acute care, community services, or indeed local authorities, you will have your own organisational networks that you can tap into in terms of colleagues you work with, whether that's in IT, in estates, in our other medical and nursing colleagues. So there are those, I think, things, Ben, at scale that we can do in local organisations. There are also the structural things we have in allied health. So you all have, there are AHP faculties, there are AHP councils as well, which can have a real focus in bringing things together across the geography. And of course, for our undergraduates, for our students and our learners and our apprentices, they also have relationships to the universities on local basis as well, which again, I think in terms of thinking about evidence and the impact that has, and also the curricular issues as well, are really important. But I think you touched, Ben, on the social movement piece. I've been in post in September 10 years and sort of think, where's that gone? But actually, this didn't exist 10 years ago in terms of as a collective. And we are the only thing in NHS England that has its own brand. And as you know, we've launched our Greener AHP badge, which is the icon badge in a greener form this week. And there'll be more of that later, undoubtedly. But social movements are really important. So I appreciate that there are aspects of social media that are less than good these days, but it is still a place for good and sharing information in terms of whatever the channel is that you use. And I think the promotion that you've done this week, some of the things I've seen have just been absolutely great, but I wouldn't have seen them had it not been for social media. So I think there is still a place, Pen, for that social movement piece and that narrative about the hashtag Greener AHP. And also then don't be shy in terms of your endeavours. So there are plenty of awards ranging from the Health Service Journal. I have awards in England in terms of the Greener Award, which was launched 2 years ago by my Greener NHS colleagues. And Nick, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer, who's on sabbatical at the moment, described our current winner as kick-ass. Only Nick could describe somebody in that fashion, I have to say. But nonetheless, that individual went on to be the current AHP of the year. And in fact, in terms of awards, I'm an occupational therapist by my professional background. Don't normally mention that, but I did attend for CPD purposes the Casson Memorial Lecture, which is the sort of highest honour academically that can be bestowed by the Royal College of OT on an individual to offer that each year. A bit like for my dietetic colleagues, the Elsie Woodison Lecture, similar sort of thing. And in fact, the Greener Awards and indeed Sue Norman, the current winner, did actually get a mention in the Castle Memorial Lecture on Wednesday evening. So I think for me, don't be shy. Think about what you could enter, where you could sort of cast that shadow in terms of to really bring provenance and prominence to the work that you've been doing. And then finally, from me, there's something about supply chain. So the first winner of the Greener AHP Award in England was for my colleagues at Royal Wolverhampton, the orthotics department, who completely reimagined their service in terms of waste disposal, patient transport, but also they thought about their thermoplastic supply chain and delivery lines. So I think there's something about NHS supply chain in terms of our relationship with them and also our purchasing colleagues in trusts. There's something about our commissioners too, in terms of influencing them, in terms of what they're looking for, in terms of the evidence base. And then finally, Ben, from me, there's a piece about how we network with third sector organisations who are involved in this sort of sphere, and indeed our patient groups too, who are really influential. So those are my initial thoughts, and obviously other colleagues I'm sure will come in on that.
That's great. Thank you, Suzanne. So I'll open this question up to Derek, Manraj, Rebecca. Is there anything you would like to add about ways of scaling up the good examples of Greener AHP this week? Derek.
Thanks, Ben. And it's interesting, Suzanne, as I was reflecting on what you were saying, I had this thing about the bottom up and the top down and where they meet, because the leadership that you and Linda and team have given on this in the AHP sector has been, transformative, if you don't mind me saying. But if I'm a busy person with a budget or running a trust or delivering all this, what are the push and pull factors on me? Well, I can do it because I'm legally required to. I can do it because it'll save me money. I can do it because it'll improve my patient outcomes. Or I can do it because actually my staff and patients are going, this is something which is good and which we expect. And as time goes on, becomes part of sustainable healthcare. So the top down and the bottom up both matter in scaling up implementation, and hopefully meet along the way.
Manraj.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's something about what I saw in the week, which is around building that really strong case for change, which takes in some of what you mentioned, you know, what are those environmental benefits, but also the benefits to patients and the financial benefits, and really sort of, like you said, Suzanne, is being proud to sort of share that and shout about it. And through that, I think, comes out working together, working across all of those other areas, including the sustainability leads that we now have in trusts, and bringing all of those people together. But building that case initially, which was demonstrated really well through many projects in the week, I think puts you at a really strong standing on then scaling up those ideas. And the other piece is around, I think, building it in current priorities or current movements. There was a lot around virtual care that has some of those win-win scenarios, especially for patients that struggle to make it in person, but you know, it has to be for the right people at the right time. But those sort of points where you can lever it on to something that's already happening and show those benefits, I think supports that scale up. So yeah, it's fantastic to see so many of those examples come through.
Yeah, it's been really inspiring. Rebecca.
Yes, we have had a fantastic week. I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful that this is happening. From the sort of patient perspective, I know that they'll be very pleased this sort of conversation is taking place. And I was pleased with themes about the sort of holistical cultural approach to the amount of education that's going on, the funding made available, and the fact that it's measured outcomes, data driven, and really there's so many checks on patient safety. But the big thing that came out to me is the passion of the people that have attended this week to get this done. But with it sort of examples of scaling up, I have thought about if there are other communities or businesses outside the NHS that are dealing with this, and rather than whether reinventing the wheel, we could approach, again, universities because they've got links with students, local authorities, etc., that use the services. Have they come up with really good ideas as to how to become green? So that could be a scaling up a way of approaching people. And that kind of also comes to, I agree that the community appointment days are one of the things that were the highlights of the week for me. And I think scaling these up, and whether they could be locally adapted to be sort of culturally sensitive and to support the minority background, so the way that we can expand into that sort of area to scale it up and really talk to these communities about how they want it doing and how that could be done. And then the other last thing that came to mind, having been kind of really pleased but also overwhelmed with what I've heard this week, is some sort of roadmap of courses and resources. Somebody mentioned about that, and I thought that was a brilliant idea. You know, where do you start? If you're this particular person and you've got this particular sort of needs, is this course best to start with? A small, you know, what is this centre to approach the best one? And then when you've done that, you could go on to this if you have this interest or that. And then I think people wouldn't be overwhelmed and say, oh gosh, I don't know who to contact, I don't know which would be best for me. So if somebody could draw up some sort of roadmap, then people might actually start at the beginning and then actually go down the process. So those were the things that sort of struck me in that area this week. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, and so I've just put the link to the Greener AHP hubs, kind of related to what you're saying. The implementation plan for the environmental sustainability theme in the AHP's Deliver strategy, there it's broken down into separate parts on the link for different levels. So say, for example, you can go on to the individual level and see, be signposted to different types of training, different resources. So if people aren't aware of that, then there is a lot of signposting there. So yeah, if I stay with you, Rebecca, it's really good to hear whether there is anything that has surprised you this week. And
I think, sorry,
all good.
I think I shouldn't have been, because I know that this is a brilliant body of colleagues, but I've been surprised on the sidelines the amount of sort of government funding, the legal processes that suppliers need to go through, and the SUSQI, the Sustainable Quality Improvement, demonstrates that really. I heard that they started in 2008. But it's been exponential. This green following and this green way of doing things seems to have really kicked off exponentially in the last few years. And they mentioned that they've gone from 6 staff in 2020 to now having 30 staff that are assisting departments in how to become greener. And it's brilliant that it's just taken off like this. And also that they measure health comes against sustainable and financial, that the fact that there is so much data-driven measured outcomes being made is fantastic to hear that it's being done so scientifically. Again, it shouldn't be a surprise that it is, looking at the body of people, but that it's not just that it saves the planet, it saves money, and the patient experience and the health outcome is also improved. And that has been my kind of take-home message really from this week.
Yeah, and I was really struck by something you said in the AHP SUSNet networking event about how you think a lot of this should be communicated more clearly to patients about the action that's happening. Yeah,
patients are clearly involved in the process of what will be best for them, what their experience will be like. Which is great. The patient focus groups and things, I think, would be another way of scaling up and improving, bringing patients into the co-production of what's going on with this type of work. But I also think that there should be some media output or some discussion or information giving to the patient cohort as to the wonderful work that's going off behind the scenes here. I don't think the user of the NHS realises how much endeavour is going into sustainable healthcare, and I think it would be a really useful thing, a good thing to have a positive NHS news story for a change. I think it would be a good thing to sort of press release really what's going on.
It would indeed. We need to spread the word.
Yeah.
So, Suzanne.
I think for me it was about how imaginative people have been. So I've just picked sort of 3 things that I picked up during the week. I mean, one of them is, you could say, incredibly simple, but why haven't we thought about it before? And I think, you know, it's 40 years this year since I started my training, and I think there are things that we do that we've always done that started for a reason, not evidentially, possibly, and we've carried on doing them. And so it is with couch roll, the good old blue paper roll. And I've seen that on social, and so many people have picked up on this and gone, because even if you use it, notwithstanding the fact your patient might get their feet tangled up in it and rip it and whatever, you still have to clean the couch after the person has left. So what is the point in putting a paper roll on the couch? So that was the first thing, which might seem very simple, but if we, you know, one simple thing sometimes leads to another, as we all know. The other one which really struck me was, again, from one of our smaller professional groups, from the arts psychotherapists, from our music therapy colleagues, who were extolling the virtues of purchasing second-hand instruments to actually use in their practice. And again, fairly logical, but actually it's something that unless we endorse and promote that, you wouldn't think about it. And the final one that I picked up from my perspective was actually, again, quite often as professionals in a health sense, and indeed in social care, we don't befriend our other colleagues in organisations. And as many of you know, I've been a chief executive and obviously worked with a range of other colleagues too. But actually, I have to say my hat's off to Notts Healthcare, because they've actually got a joint meeting with the Trust's energy and environmental team for their next AHP meeting. Brilliant. So actually, from my perspective, it's about go forth and befriend people in your organisations who can help you achieve your ambitions. So actually for me, it's a great, I've just chosen 3 things that I spotted that, you know, some of them could seem quite simple, but actually they are really quite game changing in terms of how we think about and make connections and endorse things. So really great stuff. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's really important to, just have the time and space just to step back from business as you like. We just keep doing the same thing. We just need a bit of time and space just to step back and look at it through a sustainability lens, and then small changes can lead to big changes. Manraj.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I just want to echo Rebecca, where I was so taken aback by the sheer variety and the fact that all of the 14 AHPs have somewhere been in the week. I'm very pleasantly surprised by how far we've come, you know, just looking at a couple of years to where we are now, where people are considering the impact on their patients, like you said, as well as well-being, and the food we eat. Is just incredible to see the breadth of things on show, really. And very surprised and, you know, amazed by Liz's tech skills on the launch day. You know, the whole team at the back showing a huge variety of ambitious projects that they've done. So yeah, it's fantastic to see. So I just echo that.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, Derek, anything that surprised you this week?
I suppose it was, as Rebecca was saying, things that shouldn't necessarily surprise you, but it was helpful just to the width. So even just today, you know, there have been sessions on mental health and occupational health, on the value of green space in well-being, and then I flipped straight from that into a session on reuse of surgical equipment, which you wouldn't think is in the speech and language area, but actually on the swallow side and the dysphagia side, we absolutely need to think about reuse and recycling of equipment. So that range has been helpful. I mean, Suzanne, you mentioned Wales. There's a lot good going on in Wales, and I just reflect on what it is that we might learn from that across the UK, and why that might be, maybe in terms of scale. And then, of course, it's about, there is so much good practice already in existence. How do you make sure that you don't spend time reinventing the wheel and going over ground which is already there, and the dreaded issue of spreading what we already know is good?
Yeah,
and I suppose one of the things I would add to that, Ben, if I may, from Derek's point, is in the future, given that we now have the agreed curricula across the United Kingdom in all of our undergraduate registered professions, you know, clearly there will be a generation of allied health professionals coming into practice who will have a shared understanding and common understanding of the agenda and the expectations, which I think, Derek, will help drive exactly the point that you've just made.
Yeah, and yeah, and I just wanted to echo what great work is happening in Wales, and if people aren't aware of the Welsh Future Generations Act, then do have a look at that, and hopefully other countries in the UK will follow suit.
Ben, do you mind if I just pick up the point that Vanessa's just made in the chat? And I hope you don't mind me. I'm conscious we said we try and pick things up as they go along. So Vanessa, thank you for that. Vanessa's actually saying about having a green champion in each service area and to have some time to focus on this. And certainly from our perspective in England, and I can't speak for my colleague Ruth in Wales, we actually published some guidance in 2017, updated in 2019 on job planning. And actually, it isn't just about consultant and advanced practitioner colleagues, but it is actually for our other allied health colleagues too. And actually, I think the job planning piece fits really nicely with your suggestion in terms of actually having dedicated time, which could be fitted into a job plan. So apologies, Ben, I just saw that out of the corner of my eye and thought I would mention that in the context of Vanessa's point, because I think that's quite well made. So the document is actually available on our AHP web pages in NHS England.
That's great, thank you, Suzanne. And I'll just pick up on Jackie's point. One of the things which has come across from the week has been that people are connecting with each other, similar professionals across the country, and that's something that has really come across, that a lot of the people stating in some of the meetings that they have kind of felt somewhat, if they have the green champions role in the team and they're the only person in the team that's really championing this, they can feel somewhat isolated with this, but coming together, people are really feeling part of a movement and part of change, and yeah, I think that there's something about the networking that has been really, really valuable and important this week. And yeah, I will put a link to CSH networks in the chat if anybody would like to join any of the networks we have at the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. And we have regular free events ongoing for AHPs. Then hopefully this networking and this building this community can keep growing.
And I've just put the job planning guidance actually in the chat, Ben. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. So the next question for the panel, I will start with you, Derek. And how do you think that professional bodies, policymakers, sustainability managers and clinicians could work together more effectively for change?
A big one. I suppose what you just named there, Ben, mirrors some of the functions of a professional body. So from our perspective, I mean, Suzanne, we haven't, you and I are obviously thinking alike here. I was going to talk about exactly that on curriculum. So to begin with, when you say HEIs, Ben, as a professional body, it is great news that we've now got the sustainable curriculum expectation, because as we move on this year to review the speech and language therapy curriculum, alongside all of the individual things that people want in specialisms, alongside the urgent need on decolonisation and anti-racism, we know that there is now an expectation that we build sustainable healthcare into the SLT pre-reg curriculum. And as you say, Suzanne, over time, that flows through into who we are as clinicians. The next bit of the professional body role, I guess, is around advocacy and influencing. So it's about supporting people doing the right thing and pressuring others who are not to make change. But then within the profession, what do we need to do as a professional body? We need to act as a role model. So we need to make sure that the organisation itself demonstrates in practice in what it's doing, whether it's travel or procurement or energy, small though that may be. We then, I think, for people who within a profession, we can both give permission and say, it's okay to do this, it's good to do this, and almost an expectation that you, as a speech and language therapist in our case, should see sustainability as part of what it is to be in this profession. And then it's about showing the way. And we've been really pleased to use Greener NHS AHP Week to launch the first ever Royal College position paper working group, which will lead to a badge statement of greening SLT practice, which then gives people something from which they can draw. So I think those are my first reflections.
That's great. Thank you, Derek. I'll open it to the rest of the panel. So how do you think professional body...
So I think there's something for me, and this is, I guess, Manraj, apologies. I think from my point of view, this is one of the rare occasions where simultaneously the professional bodies, individually but collectively together, are speaking in a narrative about the same agenda. And because that's actually, in terms of the way we work, is quite unusual in terms of the individual work of each professional body and its respective profession. But what I think is really fabulous is, because of the issues Derek has just described, one can learn a lot from other professions which are perceivably unalike, but actually can offer different lenses in terms of how approaches can be made. I mean, for example, Derek touched on the perioperative and theatre environment in terms of reuse of it, but then in terms of endoscopic work and swallowing work in speech and language therapy, equally important. And then again, in terms of the, one could talk about hospital catering, but again, in thinking about nutrition and dietetics in terms of that sort of field to fork, it also has we all need nutrition. And actually BDA, British Dietetic Association, have issued some really interesting guidance on personal nutrition this week. So I think for me, the things that have come from the individual professional bodies clearly are of use and of interest to their members, but equally they're of interest to the rest of the community, because actually it gives us a sense of, well, that's interesting, what are they doing? Can we utilise that in some way? And there may be personal aspects to that, and particularly for chief AHPs who are responsible for multi-professional teams as well. It's equally important to have that different lens in terms of the perspectives of the professions that you represent. So, Manraj, sorry, I cut across you.
No worries. I was just going to sort of say that I think what we need to bring all of those, professional bodies, policymakers, sustainability managers and clinicians together is a sort of reset in some way, and to bring together a bit more of a common language and pull the focus back on our patients and our clinical services and care delivery. And hopefully when we do that, we can break out of our silos a little bit. Like you said, Suzanne, we can look across the pond at somewhere else and see how they're doing it. And I think this piece of work is bigger than its parts, isn't it? We sort of need to work with estates and facilities and sustainability needs, which is almost the beauty of working in this space, is that you break out of your comfort zone and you learn new things. So, in the Green NHS, we're working on a sort of framework to bring back that patient clinical lens on. So it's, the low carbon care steps, looking at settings, treatment, efficiency, prevention and system change. And the system change element is bringing all of those pieces together, but we're bringing a clinical lens to it. So I think it's almost just saying we're all in it for the same purposes, and let's kind of work together a little bit, and hopefully that will sort of make it a bit more effective. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
And yeah, Rebecca, do you have anything you'd like to add to this question?
I think somebody said again in the week about something else, is get to know who's interested in sustainability in each of the areas. Some are going to be happier to get involved than others, and just have a good sort of hunt around and find out who is really interested in these areas as the lead person to ask about, and perhaps have a chat with each area about what's important to a manager is going to be different to what's important to the catering sort of department, and ask and then see if you can find a way to get them to interlink. So you can say, oh, this is important to you, this is important to you, but if you do this, it's actually going to be beneficial to both of you. So it's sort of linking people up with conversations, I think, rather than consultations.
Yeah, and it's very important we learn from others, but I think if we are part of a professional body or profession that is taking a lead in a particular area, then we really need to think how we can communicate that clearly. And what you were saying earlier, Derek, about the importance of bottom down and top down, bottom up, and meeting in the middle. So, for example, the British Association of Art Therapists last November, I think they're the first professional body to have a conference that was just focusing on the climate crisis. And there was some great work on that day, but I think, there may not be a broad awareness in some areas that has happened. And so how can people learn from the work? Or how can we communicate the good work that we are maybe doing? So if there is an art therapist in a team who can communicate that to the rest of their team, but also as professional bodies, we need to be receptive to where other people are leading and how we can follow that. Okay, so if there are any questions anybody has, do please put them in the chat. But I will start Manraj for this. This is the last of the questions I have, which is, what's the key message that you'd like to give someone who might behave in a greener way at home, but is unsure how to become a greener AHP in their practice?
That's a good one. I guess I've got 3 messages, and then I've got a prop that I use, which I'll share. So the first one is to not be scared. I think Suzanne said that earlier, is really bring your identity, your values into your workspace. I think we need to break that culture slightly in the NHS, where I sort of leave myself at home and I go into operating it at work, and I'm sort of in a different mode. So don't be scared. It is a sort of daunting experience when you do that the first time, but we need to start to break that culture down. The second one is to start small and to start with others. And I think some of the networks that you mentioned, Ben, and a lot of the work in this last week really demonstrated that it was that couch roll, it was that conversation, not consultation. I love that. And that started something small and gave an individual or a team the confidence to do something. So I'd say, that's a key message in terms of take something from home and bring it in. And there was lots around food as well and active travel, which are always little things that you already do that are quite easy to translate into work practice. And then I think the third one is to consider yourself a change agent. And there's a great piece of work that we did. I see Peter on the call. There's a whole host of sort of resources on our training hub, and one is with the Horizons team, and it's really about making you do that transition, enabling this social movement to some degree, and thinking actually I can do it at home, I can do a small bit at work, and I can sort of take it further. And the last thing is my prop, which is this climate Venn, which you probably can't see very well. And it's how I sort of keep myself going in a way, and it's sort of 3 circled, and in the middle is your action or the thing that you do. So it's do what brings you joy, do what needs doing, and we kind of know what that is. And then what are you good at? So what are the skills that you've got? What makes you happy and makes you tick? And what are the key things in your area that need doing? And in the middle there is your climate action that you can take from home into the workplace. So hopefully that inspires some of you to do so.
Thank you, Manraj. I've just shared the Venn diagram in the chat. Yeah, I'll open the question to the rest of the panel. So this is a key message you'd like to give someone who may behave in a greener way at home, but is unsure how to become a greener AHP in their practice. So Rebecca.
Yeah, I think it's another good example of a conversation rather than a consultation. Obviously, I'm coming from the patient perspective on this, but having a conversation with the patient can often teach the professional about this sort of area. Where do they recycle their pill packets? That can be, one thing. You might learn, oh, actually, there's a good place where they will actually take them, and then you can pass that on to the next patient. Do their families have a favourite way to travel? You can see somebody perhaps lives near you and they've come in on the bus. Oh, which bus did they catch? And these are quite specific examples, but it's a way of bringing what the patients are doing into the hospital and the professional being able to use them. Do you prefer this face-to-face appointment? Have you had any virtual appointments? And then you'll probably get a feel of whether the patients like this type of consultation personally, or whether they're more than happy. You'll probably get to be able to sort of analyse which ones they're happy to do where. So just having that conversation with the patient and seeing what their experiences are again can be brought into altering the way that people work at the hospital and in their clinical environment as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. Derek.
Thank you. Yeah, quickly on that, but I'm aware, Ben, there's also a question from Vanessa in the chat, which I'll touch on if I may. I mean, yeah, what would I say to people? Yeah, don't be afraid to start small. The stuff you need is already there to work from, and it's not rocket science in the sense that if I'm trying to reduce my car use in my personal life, how can I reduce my car use in my working life? If I'm trying to reuse and recycle in my personal life, how can I do that in my working life? And take it from there. On Vanessa, your question about sustainability targets like waiting lists, I suppose there's one thing if it's quantitative, like carbon reduction and carbon budgeting, yeah. But a lot of what we've heard this week, which has been really powerful too, has been about how we support sustainability in the work we do. So the stuff I've heard about mental health, if you think about our context in speech and language, supporting sustainable lifestyle choices for people with communication challenge and possibly cognitive challenge. And some of that stuff feels more qualitative. I don't immediately see a quantitative target, but should people be incentivized, both carrot and stick? Well, yeah, probably yes.
Thank you. So Suzanne, we have 2 questions in the offing now. So yeah, if there's anything you'd like to comment on about how to be greener in the workplace as well as at home.
I guess for me, they are one and the same in some senses, because actually if one thinks about how you live your life. So whether it's recycling, travel, considered purchases about clothing. So for example, I saw something about uniform amnesties and recycling of uniforms during the week. It's about how one makes ethical decisions about purchasing garments. So for example, many people know that the entirety of my wedding ring is recycled. For example, it was made out of my grandmother's ring and my mother's engagement ring. So for me, that's how I live my life, is in terms of I've made very considered decisions about the possessions I have, and actually so it is with how you translate what you do in your personal life to your work life. So whether it's travel, it's decisions. I suppose the thing for me, it's about stay curious. That's the phrase I've always used in terms of find out more, be informed, and I think we heard that during the course of the week from colleagues as well. In the second question, to some degree, in terms of mandating those sorts of levels of decision, are political decisions in terms of whether those are made by our organisations in whichever of our home countries. And clearly, at the moment, we are probably not in such a sophisticated situation. But I suppose one of the things that I've set out this year as Chief AHP Officer in England is my priorities, aside from AHPs deliver, are ACP, which is not advanced clinical practice, in case anybody's wondering. It's actually alignment, consolidation and prioritisation. So I offer you the P section of that as prioritisation, because there will be some things which are a bit like low-hanging fruit that you could do, that you could identify, that will make a material difference and could be done quite easily in your sphere of work. But there are some things that, like the alignment bit, you might need to work with other colleagues in your organisation, or as Rebecca said, in the third sector or in the local area. And I suppose one of the final things I would just sort of leave as a thought is many of our organisations, I do quite a lot of work with the ambulance service, which cover huge geographies, and we are anchor organisations in the places in which we work and operate. And there are many other organisations, such as the local authorities, social housing, police, fire, etc., who are also in this game together as anchor organisations. And there's something about how is it we can work with and through our organisations with others on this agenda too.
That's great. Thank you, Suzanne. Manraj, Rebecca, I wonder if you have any thoughts on where there should be targets like waiting list. So the question from Vanessa in the chat, should services have a target like waiting list targets to ensure sustainable working is part of service delivery?
I think Derek sort of touched on it in terms of how we'd measure that and put it in place to a certain degree. I guess in some ways we do have that. It may not be so explicit, but there is a sort of mandate to align to your green plan, to deliver on your green plan, and you can take that from a sort of service delivery through to an ICB level. So I guess from a high level, those targets do exist, but if you mean sort of more specifically, are we saying, have you dropped this by 10% this month? We probably aren't quite there, but I feel maybe it's quite a complex beast, isn't it? We probably need a sort of system-wide approach, and each thing will be measured slightly differently. It may not all be carbon, but it may be, how many appointments have been sort of that were inappropriate or unnecessary or duplicated, have been moved elsewhere, etc. So I think quantifying it will be tricky, but I think some targets and requirements do exist, and CQC is a great example of how that's starting to filter into the wider ecosystem.
Thank you. And Rebecca, what you were saying earlier about this being communicated more clearly with patients, I'm wondering if some understanding from patients that the NHS do have these targets that they are having to meet, and that service delivery will be changing, and some of the changes will be connected with that.
Yes, I follow the news quite closely, but I was not aware of the length of this. In fact, one of the slides this morning came up and it was my local hospital that is now using reusable surgical gowns, and I had no idea, and I really thought that I followed what was happening in my local hospital quite well. Whether they've got some anxiety about how the patients will react to hearing that they're having reusable gowns in theatre. So I think a lot of it needs to be educating the general public as just how data driven, this is being done. I think they need to go hand in hand so that the patient doesn't get anxious about the safety of their care, for example. But certainly, yeah, it needs to be out there more, the good work that's going on.
Thank you. So we're going to bring this panel to a close. Thank you all. I'm just going to ask a final thought. If there is anything that you would like to see from Greener AHP Week next year, or in the year leading up to it. Rebecca.
Sorry, yeah. Again, patient perspective, I think it would be really nice if we could have a patient focus group as one of these sessions next year. So you could probably do a focus group with them prior to it, and then invite them to actually, as I just mentioned, are they anxious about their safety? How are they? Do they realise what's going on? So actually bringing a patient focus group session in next year, I think, would be nice.
Great, thank you. And is there anything anyone else? Manraj?
I just wondered, I was reflecting on that point about, you know, looking across the pond or looking where else things have happened, and maybe there may be one session where various parts of the system that may be outside of AHP or certain specialities sort of come in and share, and you reciprocate the other way, because I think there is a lot happening, and to risk reinventing the wheel. I don't know how you orchestrate that, but that will be the challenge. But just to have a little taste of that would be great. And I think that idea of having patient representation more broadly is fantastic.
Yeah, both great ideas. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne.
And I guess finally from me, I'd just be grateful to Sam and Jackie in terms of a sense of participation across the professions, because from my perspective, if there's anything I then need to do as chief to lean in terms of particular groups, perhaps if we've not had the same level of engagement across the piece, that would be just useful to understand.
Yeah, and Derek, anything from a professional body perspective you'd like to see next year?
I saw Jacqueline's hand there, but the you know, co-production with people with lived experience, absolutely, and maybe more broadly into the EDI area, as we know the health inequality implications, but perhaps more on EDI and some of those implications for next year would be good.
Yeah, right. Sorry, Jackie.
No, I was just going to respond to what Suzanne was saying. I think we've been able to engage nearly all of the allied health professions this week. So they have been speaking or doing things within their organisations as well. So it's been good. Obviously some more than others, but yeah, it's great.
And what I would like to hear from Greener AHP Week next year is how this type of sustainability lens on our practice has become much more normalised, and people are considering it just as a more regular part of their practice. But I'm very glad, Sam and Jackie, that you've turned your cameras on, because we get to thank you, give you a round of applause for everything you've done putting the programme together for this week. And thank you, Peter, and to Linda and everyone at the Capo team who has helped, Caitlin, Magatu. Yeah, it's felt more like a festival this week, and so it's been great. So thank you to the panel members. Thank you to everybody who has presented this week, and the nearly 1,000 people who've come along for the sessions. And yeah, really excited to see how this conversation continues. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, and of course a big thank you to